The Siege of Mariupol will go down in history, both for the bravery of its Ukrainian defenders and the brutality of the Russian assault. But it seems like the battle could finally be over. Moscow says the last fighters defending the city's Avastal steel plant have now surrendered. Well, let's speak to reporter Antonia Cundy, who is in Kharkiv. Good morning, Antonia.
Morning.
So what do we know about this? Russia is saying that everybody is now out of the steel plant. Has that been verified by anybody else?
Well, Ukraine haven't yet given a response, so it is hard to know whether that is definitely true. Russian state media have played a video of a senior Marine commander declaring that all the Marines have left. But of course, we can't be completely sure that that is true. They've also said that there are kind of over 2,000 soldiers that surrendered from the plant in recent days. Bringing the total to, I think, just under 2,500. But the Institute for the Study of War has sort of warned that, they might be inflating that figure to gain negotiating power, and also possibly just to save face for the fact that there might have only been hundreds or maybe a smaller number of thousands. So it's hard to know until Ukraine gives their kind of formal response.
And we know that other people, other fighters who have come out of that steelworks have been taken away by Russians into Russian-held territories. Some suggestion there may be some prisoner swap at some stage. Do we know yet where these people have gone who have just come out, or once again, is it still unclear?
It's still sort of unclear. Some have been taken to kind of penal colonies in the Russian-controlled territory. The Red Cross is kind of desperately trying to register everyone as a prisoner of war to ensure that the proper protections around the Geneva Convention are applied to them. But there are also some concerns that Russia might try and put some of the soldiers on trial for war crimes, as they're sort of branding them as Nazis, which sort of plays into Putin's whole rhetoric around this war.
So carry on.
No, I was just going to say, but again, Zelensky has said that there'll be a prisoner exchange, but we don't know yet at the moment what the response from Russia is in that regard.
I said in the introduction you're in Kharkiv, and I know that there has been a movement on the front line in the area. Just tell us what the situation is where you are.
Yeah, so the Ukrainian forces managed to kind of push the Russians further out of Kharkiv, and they're now about 20-30 kilometres from the outskirts of the city. But this front line is, there was this kind of an initial buoy of movement, but they seem to now be doing that a bit more slowly because the Russian troops have kind of dug in towards the north and east of the city and are proving harder to push further back. So it has relieved the city from sort of, these months of intense shelling, but it still is within striking distance. The hotel that I'm staying at the moment is in fact doubling up as a sort of bomb shelter for the families in the apartments above, and there are some of them that still, they've been spending months here and they will not come out yet. They are not convinced that the threat is entirely gone.
What's the mood amongst people in Kharkiv? Do they have any ability to lead any sense of a normal life right now, or is it literally just hunkering down and living day by day?
It sort of depends on who you meet. It's definitely not a unanimous hunkering down. There are still people living in the subway. There are still people living in shelters like this, for example. But then there are a few others who walk the street with, a child in a pushchair. Shops and cafes are starting to open, but it is still very quiet. This is not like we see in previously liberated areas, like around the outskirts of Kyiv and Bucha and Borodyanka, for example, where normal life is very definitely returning. Transport only started here again, buses on Monday, and last night we were going to a supermarket at about 8 p.m. It's a good hour before curfew, and the streets were eerily quiet, and there is one supermarket that's open, no restaurants. So yeah, it's a way off normal life yet.
You mentioned Bucha there. I know that you visited there recently. Of course, the scene of those atrocities that really, the photographs that came out shocked the world. Sadly, we hear more and more that there are so many other Buchas. But just tell us what you saw as you spoke to people, what they told you about life in Bucha right now.
Yeah, so they said that, you know, they are trying to live their lives again. There are thousands returning each day. About a quarter of the town's population had returned when I was there a few days ago. People are walking the street, you know, they're sort of laying new grass, and it's quite incongruous at times in certain parts of the city where you really find it hard to imagine what went on here. But it depends again where you are. There are regions that have been much more heavily hit. There are the sort of famous two streets where many of the civilian bodies were discovered, and they bear these sort of the scars a lot more. Residents are sort of quite clearly traumatized in that they, as soon as you approach them, they will sort of give this outpouring of anger, and yeah, just describing what their experience was like. But it was a minority of residents who did actually experience the true horrors. Only about 4,000 stayed in the city, so others are returning.
But presumably on a practical level, as people return to the city, the destruction, they could find that their home is destroyed. There must be a practical element of where people are actually able to live and whether they're able to go back to their homes.
Yeah, so for example, in Borodyanka, there's a school that's no longer being used because obviously the schools have been turned online, and the kind of local council, local government has set up shop there because their building was completely destroyed. And in that, the school's canteen, every day there are meals served to hundreds of people who either no longer have gas connection at their house or simply don't have a home. It's also doubling up as a shelter for those that don't have a home to sleep in. So yeah, it depends. Basically, if you had a house, you know, the water's been restored, the gas has been restored, the electricity's been restored, and your house is still standing, or your apartment, you are able to return to a normal life. But others are having to put in new windows, doors, ceilings, the whole works, or stay in the shelters if their house was completely flattened.